In 1968, a young Swedish woman stepped off a plane in Los Angeles with nothing but a dream and a title that would change her life forever: Miss Nude Universe. Within 5 years, she would become one of the most recognizable faces in American cinema, starring in over 50 films and working with legendary directors who pushed the boundaries of what Hollywood could be. Her name was Uschi Digard, and this is her untold story, a tale of ambition, transformation, and the price of fame in the golden age of exploitation cinema. By the end of this documentary, you'll discover how a small-town Swedish girl became an icon of an era, why her Russ Meyer films made her a household name among exploitation film fans, and what ultimately happened to this 1970s Hollywood actress when the camera stopped rolling. But before we dive into the complete biography of Uschi Digard, if you love discovering the forgotten legends of Hollywood's golden age and learning about classic cinema history, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because every week we're uncovering the untold stories that history almost forgot, from Swedish actresses who conquered Hollywood to the exploitation film stars who defined an era. Born Uschi Digard on August 15, 1948, a quiet Swedish town, young Uschi Digard grew up in post-war Europe, a world very different from the one she would soon enter. Sweden, in the 1960s, was experiencing a cultural revolution. The country was becoming synonymous with progressive attitudes towards sexuality and personal freedom, a reputation that would inadvertently shape Uschi Digard's future career in American cinema. As a teenager, this Swedish actress was known for her striking beauty and statuesque figure. Standing tall with distinctive features, she turned heads wherever she went. But unlike many young women of her era, Uschi wasn't content with a traditional path. In the late 1960s, Uschi Digard made a life-changing decision. She would leave Sweden and pursue opportunities in the United States, the land of Hollywood, dreams, and reinvention. This Swedish star's journey to America would become one of the most fascinating stories of 1970s cinema history. But how does an unknown Swedish woman break into American entertainment? For Uschi Digard, the answer came through an unexpected avenue: beauty pageants and the world of exploitation films that was just beginning to explode in popularity. In 1968, she entered and won the title of Miss Nude Universe, a beauty competition that, while controversial, opened doors that traditional pageants never could. This Miss Nude Universe title became the launching pad for Uschi Digard's Hollywood career, connecting her with directors and producers in the burgeoning exploitation film industry. The timing couldn't have been better. American cinema was undergoing a radical transformation, and Uschi Digard Biography would soon become intertwined with one of the most influential independent filmmakers of the era. Now, you might be wondering, how does a beauty pageant title lead to a film career in 1970s Hollywood? The answer lies in the unique entertainment landscape of early 1970s America, the rise of exploitation, cinema, and one legendary director who would change everything for this Swedish Hollywood actress. Enter Russ Meyer, a former World War II combat cameraman turned filmmaker who had created his own genre, the exploitation film. Russ Meyer wasn't making mainstream Hollywood pictures. He was an independent maverick, creating films with strong female characters, satirical humor, and a visual style all his own. His movies were controversial, provocative, and undeniably popular, with audiences seeking something different from traditional cinema. In 1969, Russ Meyer discovered Uschi Digard, and he immediately recognized something special in this Swedish actress. She had the look, the screen presence, and the willingness to embrace the unconventional roles he was creating for his exploitation films. Uschi Digard's first major role came in 1970 with Cherry, Harry, and Raquel, a Russ Meyer film that showcased his signature style: bold, colorful, and unapologetically provocative. This Uschi Digard movie marked her entry into the world of exploitation cinema, where she would build a reputation as one of the most reliable and professional actresses of the genre. But it was her work in Russ Meyer's 1975 film Supervixens that would cement Uschi Digard's status as an icon of the era. In this role, Hollywood star displayed not just physical presence, but genuine screen charisma, something that transcended the limitations of the exploitation film genre and made her a favorite among both directors and audiences. Between 1968 and 1982, Uschi Digard appeared in over 50 films, making her one of the most prolific actresses in exploitation cinema history. This Swedish film star worked with multiple directors beyond Russ Meyer, appeared in various genres within the exploitation cinema world, and became a recognizable face in adult theaters and drive-ins across America. The Uschi Digard filmography includes titles like Truck Stop Women in 1974, where she demonstrated her versatility as a performer, and numerous other exploitation films that define the era. Unlike many performers of the era, Uschi Digard approached her work in these Hollywood films professionally. Directors noted her reliability, her willingness to collaborate, and her understanding of what the camera needed. This professional approach to exploitation film acting set Uschi Digard apart from many of her contemporaries and helped build her reputation as a serious actress within the genre. Her work ethic and dedication to her craft made her a sought-after performer in 1970s cinema, even as the exploitation film industry faced criticism from mainstream Hollywood. But here's what most people don't understand about the exploitation film era and actresses like Uschi Digard. These weren't just cheap movies made for quick profit. They represented something larger, a cultural moment when American cinema was being redefined, when independent filmmakers like Russ Meyer were challenging Hollywood's traditional power structure, and when actresses like this Swedish Hollywood star were finding opportunities that mainstream cinema wouldn't provide. And Uschi Digard was right at the center of this cinematic revolution. To understand Uschi Digard's significance and why her biography matters in cinema history, we need to understand the 1970s Hollywood landscape. This was the decade of cultural revolution, the aftermath of the 1960s counterculture, the sexual revolution, women's liberation, and a fundamental questioning of traditional American values. The exploitation film genre that made Uschi Digard famous was both a product of and a contributor to these cultural shifts. Hollywood was changing dramatically during Uschi Digard's career. The old studio system had collapsed. Independent filmmakers like Russ Meyer, John Waters, and others were creating films outside the mainstream and finding massive audiences hungry for content that challenged conventions. Exploitation cinema, often dismissed by critics as lowbrow entertainment, was actually a space where female characters, like those played by Uschi Digard, often had more agency, more complexity, and more screen time than in many mainstream Hollywood productions of the same era. Uschi Digard represented something unique in this landscape, a European actress bringing a different sensibility to American exploitation cinema. This Swedish star's presence in 1970s Hollywood films added an international flavor to a distinctly American genre. While traditional Hollywood often portrayed women in limited roles during this era, the exploitation film genre, for all its controversies, allowed actresses like Uschi Digard to play characters with strength, sexuality, and complexity that mainstream cinema was still reluctant to explore. She was never just a face on screen in these Russ Meyer films and other exploitation cinema productions. Directors appreciated Uschi Digard's professionalism, her understanding of camera angles and lighting, and her ability to embody the larger-than-life characters these films required. This Swedish film actress brought a level of commitment and skill to exploitation films that elevated the entire genre. Her work in 1970s cinema helped legitimize exploitation films as a valid form of artistic expression, even as mainstream critics continued to dismiss the genre. The Uschi Digard legacy extends beyond her individual performances. She became part of a movement of actresses who challenged Hollywood's traditional beauty standards and opened doors for performers who didn't fit the conventional leading lady mold. Her success as a Swedish actress in American exploitation cinema proved that audiences were hungry for diversity, authenticity, and performers who brought something unique to the screen. The biography of Uschi Digard is, in many ways, the story of how independent cinema created opportunities that mainstream Hollywood wouldn't. So, with a successful career spanning over 50 films, recognition from directors like Russ Meyer, and steady work throughout the 1970s Hollywood scene, what happened next to Uschi Digard? Why did this Swedish star eventually step away from the exploitation film spotlight? And where is Uschi Digard today? The answers reveal the challenging realities faced by actresses in exploitation cinema during this transformative era. By the early 1980s, the exploitation film landscape that had made Uschi Digard famous was changing dramatically. The rise of home video, changes in distribution methods, and shifting cultural attitudes meant that the theatrical exploitation cinema market was shrinking. The drive-in theaters where Uschi Digard movies had played were closing across America. Many performers from the 1970s Hollywood exploitation era faced a choice: transition to other work in the evolving entertainment industry or step away entirely from the public eye. For Uschi Digard, like many of her contemporaries from the exploitation film era, the decision was to move on. The details of her life after Hollywood remain largely private, a choice many performers from this era made to protect their personal lives from public scrutiny after years in the spotlight. What we know about Uschi Digard's later years is limited by her choice for privacy, and this decision should be respected. Her life after exploitation films represents a common pattern among actresses from this era who chose personal peace over continued public attention. Today, there's a renewed appreciation for the exploitation cinema of the 1970s and the actresses like Uschi Digard who define the genre. Film historians and cinema scholars now recognize these movies not as guilty pleasures to be dismissed, but as important documents of American cultural history films that captured a specific moment when the rules of Hollywood were being rewritten and independent filmmakers were challenging the establishment. The Uschi Digard filmography is now studied by cinema scholars, collected by film enthusiasts, and remembered by those who appreciate the bold, unconventional artistry of exploitation films from that transformative era. Uschi Digard's biography represents a generation of performers who worked in an industry that existed outside mainstream Hollywood acceptance, yet contributed significantly to American popular culture and cinema history. This Swedish actress who conquered 1970s Hollywood embodies the spirit of independent cinema, the courage to work outside the system, the willingness to take risks, and the determination to create art on one's own terms, even when mainstream Hollywood wouldn't provide those opportunities. The legacy of Uschi Digard extends beyond her work with Russ Meyer and other exploitation film directors. She represents a moment in cinema history when barriers were breaking down, when European actresses could find success in American independent films, and when exploitation cinema was evolving into a legitimate art form studied by film scholars today. Her contributions, though often overlooked by mainstream film history, help shape the independent cinema movement that continues to influence filmmakers today. Uschi Digard's story is one of courage, reinvention, and the pursuit of opportunity in an unconventional space within Hollywood. From a small town in Sweden to the drive-in screens of America, this Swedish star carved out a career on her own terms, worked with visionary directors like Russ Meyer, and became an icon of an unforgettable era in cinema history. Her biography reminds us that exploitation films and the actresses who starred in them deserve recognition as important contributors to American cultural history and the evolution of independent cinema. If you enjoy discovering Uschi Digard's untold story and learning about this fascinating era of 1970s Hollywood and exploitation cinema, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Every week, we're uncovering the forgotten legends of Hollywood's golden age, the stars like Uschi Digard, the scandals, the untold biographies, and the stories that shaped entertainment history. Don't miss our deep dives into Swedish actresses who conquered Hollywood, Russ Meyer's other leading ladies, and the complete history of exploitation films that defined an era. I want to hear from you in the comments. Did you know about Uschi Digard before this documentary? Have you seen any of her films with Russ Meyer or other exploitation cinema from the 1970s? And which Golden Age Hollywood star should we cover next in our biography series? Leave your suggestions below whether you want to learn about more Swedish actresses in Hollywood, other exploitation film legends, or classic cinema icons from any era. And if you can't get enough of these untold Hollywood stories and biographies of forgotten stars, check out our video on Linda Lovelace or our documentary about Vanessa Del Rio, two more fascinating figures from this same era of cinema history and exploitation films. You'll find the complete stories of these 1970s stars who, like Uschi Digard, challenged Hollywood conventions and created their own paths to success.